Today, we have a guest who is a Broadway legend. She is a Tony Award winner who's been nominated for countless Tonys and Grammys and an Emmy and an Olivier Award. I mean, she's been in like 11 Broadway shows. She has the voice of an angel and the stage presence of a goddess. And when you're watching her perform, you can't help but marvel at her excellence. And as if that weren't enough, she's the most empathetic and caring and majestic human being. I mean, we are beyond honored to have her on. Everyone, please welcome Kelli O'Hara to the podcast. Hey, Kelli.
Oh my gosh,
Yay.
Sydney, that was beautiful. I'm blushing.
Thank you so much for coming on. We're so excited to have you on.
I'm so excited to be here, guys. Thank you.
Yeah. Um, let's just start out. Let's start from the beginning. You originally are from Oklahoma, and we want to know what was your journey to Broadway like? When did you know you wanted to do theater? What took place from that realization to you making your Broadway debut? Did you start out like doing theater in Oklahoma or pageants? I don't know, talent shows, which I'm sure if you did do talent shows, you probably won every single one of them.
All right. Well, Eli and Sydney, my trip to Broadway was so vastly different from the two of you that it's unbelievable. It's like 9 day. I didn't see a Broadway show until I was 21 years old. I didn't come
Wow.
to New York until I was 21 years old for the first time. So, no, I didn't have a lot of this going on. There were talent shows. Yes. Good guess.
Hey.
And I do remember those being actually pretty impactful. The first one I did was maybe in the 5th grade. And no, the first one I ever did, and actually the first time I ever sang out loud in my life was 4th grade. My mom tells this story where she said, I think she sings, like
Oh,
nobody even knew. And I just decided, I couldn't decide whether or not, and I wasn't a dancer, by the way, at all. And I was a very chubby little kid, and I couldn't decide between doing a major jazz number that I was going to choreograph for myself, having done no dance, or sing "That's What Friends Are For" by Dionne Warwick.
Ah.
And I decided on the latter. And I was standing there. I remember I was wearing like a black and white jumper romper thing. And then after that, it was like, maybe we should put you in some sweet little voice lessons. And I was in the band. And then after that came, some school productions. And then in high school, I really started getting involved in, we did 2 musicals a year. But I will say, just really quickly, I knew of this voice teacher since I was 5 years old, named Florence Birdwell. And so in the back of my mind, I always knew I was going to go to study with her in college, which I did. And that whole trajectory, I would say, started when I was 5, but it really didn't have to do with Broadway until I was in college.
wow.
Isn't that the same voice teacher as Kristen Chenoweth?
That's correct.
Oh my gosh. Wait, is she based in Oklahoma? Is the voice teacher based in Oklahoma? No?
Always. No, yes. Yeah,
Oh,
always.
yeah?
Oklahoma, and she's had many students, a lot of opera students. Other people Megan Mullally was a student of hers.
Oh,
Wow.
I found out about her through a Miss America named Susan Powell, who was from my tiny town. And so that's how I first learned of her name. And yeah, she affected and impacted so many people's lives. And she's been my mentor my whole life, I can say, since 5.
Oh, wow.
oh,
That's
wow.
incredible.
Wait, how did you meet her? Through the girl?
I didn't, what I did was I just put it in the back of my mind. I literally was 5 years old when I heard about Susan Powell and I heard about
Oh,
Florence Birdwell, and I said, I'm going to do that.
You
And
just
sure
wow.
decided,
enough,
yeah.
sure enough, I ended up auditioning for OCU. I walked in and said, I'm going to be Florence Birdwell's student. Nobody, you had to be approved. And so they were like, really? But it worked out. She said, okay, I'll take you. And that was it. That, like, she's been my teacher long distance for the whole time I've been in New York, until
Wow.
more recently when I have a different teacher finally, but because she's retired. But it's a pretty beautiful sort of story that I had nothing to do with. I think it's more about fate.
Aw.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so you said you moved to New York when you were 21, right?
Yeah.
How did you get your start in the professional business?
So you mentioned Kristen Chenoweth. So I was
Mhm.
I was in college at OCU. I did some summer stock, musical theater of Wichita and all those things. And then we didn't at the time have a showcase or anything. So Kristen Chenoweth, sweetheart she is, hired, rented and paid for a studio at NOLA Studios, a tiny little like 10 by 10. and invited her 2 agents at the time to come sit behind a table, and 10 students from the Birdwell studio and Mrs. Birdwell flew up on our spring break, my senior year of college, and we auditioned for those agents, and somehow they took me on.
Wow.
And that was my first. That was the only thing I knew. She was the only person I knew that was sort of working in the business. And then I moved to New York in this fall, and they started sending me out.
Wow.
I love how
The
you
stars
say
just aligned.
I love how you say somehow took you on as if you aren't just this, like, crazy t talented being. Um,
Hey, at that age, I see. It took me a little bit more time to marinate than it did you guys. I was pretty green, even at
yeah.
21, really green. But they saw something, hopefully, and I guess, and they started sending me out, and the work actually became more of my education. I've been growing up a lot over the last 20 something years.
So you mentioned you had this like crazy start, and like little did you know that after college and today you would be nominated for 7 Tony Awards, and you've been a part of so many more seasons. So what was it like hearing your name for the first time, like you ever got nominated, and like you've been in so many seasons, like is there something that you've learned each time that's kind of like just prepared you for the next season, or something that you want to take with you, or something like that? Like what's your biggest takeaway?
I think that there's never anything like the first time with most
Mhm.
things, but especially the Tony Awards. I couldn't believe it. You said, little did I know. I mean, I don't even think I thought that way. The first Tony Awards ceremony I ever watched in my life was the ceremony when Kristen won. So when you think about the
Wow.
history of time, it wasn't that long ago. I just didn't grow up. Nobody told me to watch them. I didn't really know much about Broadway. I only knew about sort of movie musicals and things. We just didn't have access to it. So I didn't really know about it or put that as a dream in the back of my head. So I got up here and I did a few Broadway shows before Light in the Piazza, which that was.
Mhm.
And I started seeing it, sort of being like, oh wow, that's sort of the reach, right? That's sort of, oh, that's really cool. And so when it happened, it sort of hit me so quickly, but I was overwhelmed. I remember I attended them one year when I did a show called Sweet Smell of Success. I went that year and was sort of looking around myself down there, looking at all of the people and going, this is it. This is awesome, and just being overwhelmed. And then so when Piazza happened, I remember walking through the entire night, just kind of floating on a cloud, dressing up in my dress, performing on the stage that night and coming back, the red carpet, which I hadn't done much of any of that. It seemed so like a fantasy. And then just over the years, you never want anything to become old or take it for granted. So I would try not to think about, oh, I'm tired, or, I just did 8 shows, and you try never to think about that. You try to go, this is a once in a lifetime. And even though it's happened a few times, it is
Yeah.
still, it is still the biggest gift ever, you know.
Speaking of having to do 8 shows while doing Tony season, for The King and I, you had to do, like, the Tony Day, for when you won your Tony, um, you had to do, like, this 3-hour matinee before you had to go to you had to go to Radio City, you had to do a dress rehearsal, right? And then
Mhm.
you went back to your theater, did a 3-hour matinee, not to mention you were the lead of this show, um, and then you were nominated, so you had to walk the red carpet and you had to perform on the Tonys. How did you manage all of that seemingly effortlessly? We've talked about it on the podcast before. I still marvel at just your grace and elegance, on that day, every day, but especially on that day.
I'm going to call you out, Sydney girl, because how did you do it? You know exactly how I did it. Did you not have a show that day?
No, oh my god, Fun Home was a dream, and they didn't have us do a
Oh,
show, luckily.
lucky you, because I'll say out of the 7 times, I think maybe only one of them I didn't have a show. maybe only one of them, maybe two at the most.
But also your show is 3 hours, like,
Exactly. So I
so
took
long.
very little time to get ready for red carpet. I was rushing through trying to make it into my, my regular day makeup. I will say those are the longest and hardest and sort of adrenaline rush days of my life, you know. Um, but again, I sort of started to get used to, prepared myself for what I knew was coming. Um, it is a crazy thing. You wake up at like 6 in the morning, you get all ready in your wig, you get made up in your show look, you take a bus to Radio City, you do a full dress rehearsal, you come back, maybe you rest a minute, you do a full matinee, then you get into red carpet look, then you go to the red carpet, then you sit in your seat, and then they come get you. You go back into your wig and makeup and your costume. Then you go back to the dressing room, get and back into red carpet, go sit in your seat before your thing. And then, and then the night goes on, and there's midnight parties. And um, the year I won and the year I shared with you, and I do remember that about every season, you share it with people. And I remember seeing
Oh,
you at every event in your beautiful dresses, and I'd say, look how beautiful you look, and I'd talk to your mom, and because I was sharing that season with your brother too. He was
Yeah.
a huge part of my performance in The King and I. So your whole family was so a part of that season for me. But you do it, and that year in particular, and maybe especially because of the win, because I lost my mind and sort of my body went into, you know, anaphylactic shock.
yeah.
Um, I got the flu that year. The next day, by Thursday of that week, I was down in a way that I've never been in my life. And I missed, for the first time in my life, I missed about 4 or 5 shows. I tried to come back that next Tuesday. I was shaking. I got through the show. I was out again.
Mm.
Oh
Um,
no.
there were shows where I never could get better because I had to do the show. I had to go back to work. There were times in that show that I actually spoke my songs for a
Wow.
paying
Oh.
audience. I was like,
Mhm.
getting to know you, getting to know all about you. There was one show for the first time and only time in my life when I thought I could do it, and I had to leave at intermission. I could not phonate. I could not make anything come out, and I had a fever, and Bart Shear was like, "You're going home." So
Mm.
anyway, it was one of those moments when my body just kind of said, "Enough is enough."
Mhm.
Yeah,
Mhm.
it's definitely a tricky balance, trying to make sure you're staying healthy, not only physically and mentally, and also, doing a good job for the show.
Yeah.
For those of you who don't know, Kelly has been in, I think, is it 3 productions with my brother?
Yes, I played his mother 3 times.
3
Wow.
times.
Lucky me. Yeah.
Yeah, once in Far From Heaven, once in Peter Pan Live, and then once in King and I. Um, and yeah, she pretty much raised him. Um,
Oh.
Well, I want to embarrass you a little bit because wouldn't remember this, but I can remember seldomly when I first meet people. Sometimes it's very memorable. I was sitting upstairs at the top of Playwrights Horizons, and I don't know if it was one of the rehearsal days, but you were sitting on a little bench, waving, like flapping your legs back and forth, like in a little dress, and you had just been to some television audition, and you were probably like 6 or 7 or whatever it was, and I said, "Oh my gosh, Jake, is this your little sister?" That was the first time I played his mom. And you're like, "Hi. Yeah, I'm a big yeah." So I remember that. But yes, I started with Far From Heaven with him, delightful. And he was turning 11 that year. And then and then he became like, I have little pictures with my son when he was little with him,
oh yeah.
and then Peter
Oh.
Pan, and then of course into his adolescence, into his teenage years, and I lost him.
Oh.
Aw.
He had to go away and become a doctor.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a genius. Actually it's interesting you bring that up because something that I remember so vividly about the Tony Award season specifically is Jake telling me that you can do this thing where you crack one's thumb. And not I'm not even talking about like the joint. I'm talking about like where the thumb meets the wrist.
Mhm.
It's the weirdest feeling. But
I used to do it every day. He'd put out his hand to me, and I would do it right before we entered for the last scene in The King and I.
yeah, he told me about that, and he told me for the Tony season to like go up to you and ask you to crack my thumb. So at every single Tony event, I would come up to you and be like, "Can you crack my thumb?" Um,
What a good influence and a good mentor mentor I am for you guys.
Exactly. And you taught him how to do that, and now he does it for me, like, all the time.
Well,
I know, I was gonna sorry, I feel like you do that to me too, Sid. Do you know how to do
I'm
that?
trying to figure I don't know how you do it. It's this weird special touch thing that
well,
I
think about your 3 knuckles, there's this one, and this one. Oh my god, my
Uh-huh.
nails. But it's that one on your thumb. It's the same one, 1, 2, 3, right? So
Mhm.
you pull here back and you push down here, and I've already done it, of course, so I can't do it for you, but because I do it about every 5 minutes.
it wasn't even something that I knew could crack, and so you were the first person to, like, ever do it to me, and it's just it's weird, but it's so cool.
You're welcome, Sydney, you're welcome.
So, something we actually haven't talked about on the podcast is recording music.
Mhm.
And you have recorded 9 cast albums, 2 solo albums, and you've been featured on like 4 other albums. That's like a total of 15. So, we figured that like who better to talk about this than with you, and it's definitely worth something taking a bow for. So, can you talk about that process and what it's like? Is it different to record like a cast album compared to a solo album? And like, I don't know, like what was your most memorable recording process like?
Yeah, gosh, I've had so many wonderful, neat experiences with that. I love the cast albums. Usually, unfortunately, with cast albums, you're kind of racing in on a Monday within like the first weeks of opening. So there have been many cast albums, not only for me, but other people that I've worked with where you just can't sing it. And so there are all these, like, I remember specifically for the South Pacific cast album, you won't believe it. There's some video of me in the cast album, like recording it. I was faking it. It was like a fake promo. Like I was like this because I couldn't sing. I had lost, and I had to go in on the Thursday and record my actual vocals. It's always a real strain to do the actual cast album because it's involved with so many other things. But you get to so much about what you're doing and how you're singing it because it's the character, right? And you've been doing it on Broadway. The difference between the solo album is that you put so much pressure on it being an expression of you, and I think anybody who's done a lot of them would tell you, you got to sort of let go of it and let it be a moment in time rather than a forever. Like you want especially my first one, I wanted it to be the ultimate expression of me, like this great thing that would last forever. And ultimately, there are so many things. It's just that one day, and it can only represent sort of the time you're in your life. I have a hard time listening to that first one I made with Harry. With the one I made with Harry Connick Jr., "Wonder in the World," was it was Sony. It was like 85 pieces of orchestra. It was this overwhelming thing that was sort of it was being done to me, like it was all happening around me. For
Hmm.
my second one, always I did it myself with Ghostlight, and it was just a small group of musicians. And the funny thing is, because I was sort of co-producing it and paying for a lot of it, uh, I got this is seems to be I'm repeating myself here, but I was sick and
Oh
I
wow.
couldn't cancel the session because it was so expensive. So I have a solo album where I was compromised in my
Uh,
singing, and if I then add that to all the cast albums where I was compromised and tired, you think that you're going to get in the best shape of your life to do that one recording. Most of the time, it's some sort of compromise where you say, well, this is the best I could do today, and now it's forever. Yeah. So
hmm.
you start to let go of those sort of those controlled, neuroses, and you say, this is just a moment in time, and that was my memory of it, and it actually ended up okay. And
Yeah.
because of that, I can deal with things. I can deal with most things.
Yeah.
Yeah, musically, I mean.
I loved both albums. I listened to them last night and I was like, this is amazing. Like, you could not tell that you were sick. You sound great. I love them all.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I mean, you can never sound bad. You have the most gloriously beautiful voice. I it's just I mean, every time I listen to it, I'm just in a trance. But I want to know, like, I know especially since you're so busy and you're like constantly doing things. It's obviously hard to stay healthy and you know, keep that balance. But do you do anything specific for your voice to keep it healthy? Like, do you warm up before shows? Do you have any special tricks for it? Do you drink honey water? I don't know, breath work? I don't know. Do
Yeah. Well, a little bit of all of the above. I drink honey water for sure.
Okay.
Warm honey water. I definitely, especially for shows, I definitely sort of have to warm up my body. But I
Mm,
will say something. I got a long time ago. I sort of was I was in the opera program, and I was watching a lot of sort of neurotic behavior of, if I don't do this, and if I don't take this humabid, and if I don't blah blah steam, and if I then I won't be able to sing. And what I said to myself was, I never want to be out of control of that ability by depending on other things.
Mm,
Like, I have to do this, 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 and this, or I can't sing, because God forbid your train is late. And this has happened to me 50 times, and you run onto stage and you haven't been able to do that series of things.
mhm,
What you sabotage yourself mentally by doing that. And your mental status affects your voice
mhm,
mm,
so much. It's such a mental game, singing. And so what you have to do is you have to say, I can do it no matter what. I am in charge. So if I can't warm up like that today, then I still can sing. Because imagine if
right.
you're just at your house and you start to sing and you're still fine. But what we do is we say for a big event, oh, I've got to do this, this, and this, right? Or I won't be able to succeed. Now, yes, warm up a little bit, but sometimes I warm up less before a show, especially one that I know what I'm doing. I've sung it a million times, but I warm my body up and I warm my mind up. I do a little
Mm,
yoga or meditation or just sitting still and quiet. I do a few sirens, I do a few things, and that's it. I'm not going to like waste my whole voice before a 3-hour show. Um, and I do take care of myself. I'm not a smoker. You know, I've lived pretty boringly, I would say,
mm,
because I want to have longevity. And I think my cords are healthy because of that. But the paranoias and the sort of those neuroses I'm talking about, that's what takes our voices down. It's not a
mm.
physical thing, it's a mental thing. I've known a lot of people who've lost their voices for years because of this, not
mm.
because of an injury here. So, you guys, everybody who sings, you guys are in charge, not those chords.
I've never heard anyone put it like that. That's gonna be something that's gonna stick with me certainly, and probably a lot of our listeners.
Yeah, and it makes total sense because I mean, mentally, it's just so easy to lose track of that and just get discouraged. So, and those are often the times where it's harder to sing. And like I picked up on that, and I've just been like, listen, you got to get out of your head, and that's been like one of the most difficult things for me, like since I've hit puberty, of just trying to get out of my head. And so, just hearing you say that as well, and just like I don't know, like reinstate that into my brain, like makes all the difference.
Exactly. If you think about singing as a form of communication, you can talk, Eli.
Hmm.
And you guys, like, if you had to say something important to somebody, you would say it. You would get it done. Now, if you're crying or if you're angry, it might sound compromised or it might crack or it might, but you'll still get the communication done, right? So we must never allow ourselves to assume we can't do it. In other words, every single time you want to sing, even if you're sick, you'll get something done because we have that human power. We have that ability to communicate. Thank God, right? Because we use our voices to do it. That's why I work with these kids from SAY, the Stuttering Association for the Youth, because they
Oh.
Oh.
always. That kills me because they have it all here, but
Hmm.
something mechanical gets in their way. But
Mm,
in their minds, they have it all these beautiful things to say and to sing. So if you can, you must never let the mind get in the way of the communication. It's like if you wanted to sing something that someone told you you could never sing, like I always use like Elphaba, right? I'm never going to
Yeah.
sing Elphaba. That's not, but if I wanted to sing it, I could sing it without falling on my face. It might have a lot of vibrato and might not be what people want to hear, but I could sing it. I could sing it as a song. You understand?
mhm,
It might
Right.
not be the role, or even if but what if I put my point is that there's no can't or I won't be able to. There's just do it, but in a different way.
hmm.
Does that
Mm.
make sense?
I feel so
I think
motivated right now.
yeah. Yeah, and I think that's like with everything with performing and not just like singing, but also like with dancing and just any muscle in general. Like that's just so important to think of it that way. Just
Yeah.
because your head is a powerful thing.
Yeah, and I think there's too many rules about what the expectation of how it should be, as opposed.
Mhm.
I've just never it never ceases to amaze me when someone does something really different where I'm like, "That's it. That
Mm,
Mm.
that's where it is right there." Like I that kills me. Like just a whole different take on it because that's what how they are going to do it.
yeah.
The opera world gets really stuck in, and well, the musical theater world everywhere gets really stuck in, it has to be done this way. And it's that person, it is. It's that person who comes out and just completely turns it on its head where people go, "Oh, wait a second. Now that was really special
Mm,
and bold and brave."
Mm.
And believe me, I'm saying all this because I've been in that other place so many times. It's through experience where I've tried to do something or sound like somebody or have an expectation of what something should be and failed at it, that then
mm,
you start to take control and you start to say, it's not a failure, it's just different.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow. That actually reminds me, like right before this, I watched your video of you performing that like country opera thing. And that's just the coolest thing to me. And I mean everything you've said is just perfect. And I've never ever heard it that way.
Yeah.
And I feel so impacted and motivated right now.
Yeah, go sing something that someone told you you could never sing, but like just do it the way that feels really comfortable to you and say
Mm,
and decide for yourself, is that worthy of presenting? And you'll probably say, hell yeah, it's cool. Nobody's ever done that. It's such a different take on it. And I promise you the
mm,
composer's gonna be like, wow, thank you. I never heard it
mm,
that way. And now it's because when you think about like somebody like Rodgers and Hart or Rodgers and Hammerstein, those old fashioned like American songbook things, can you imagine how many different ways uh, something like My Funny Valentine has been sung? Or
Sure.
I was thinking of the, everybody's tired of My Favorite Things or something old fashioned because like it's like my favorite things and my favorite things and all this, but that's a compliment to the writers because people have re-envisioned it. So my
mhm.
Mhm.
point is, do take anything, a rap, anything that's like the craziest thing that you would never approach, and try to do something different with it.
Not only do you have like an impressive stage resume, but you're like a true triple threat in every meaning of the word. So you've been in some of the most well-known, yes, dancing.
I'm a major dancer.
I love it. And you're a whistler. That counts as like a triple threat, you know. So you've been in some of the most well-known TV shows, such as 13 Reasons Why, The Good Fight, Sex in the City 2, like all of these amazing things. And you recently were received an Emmy for your role, an Emmy nomination. Was it an Emmy or a nomination?
Nomination.
Okay, so you received the Emmy nomination for your role in The Accidental Wolf. So, like, what do you believe is the difference for you between acting on stage and acting in front of a camera? And just like, is there something like, would you prefer to not like prefer to do one or the other, but like, do you have like a preference on like, I don't know, like working on stage or screen and like, because obviously it's just a big difference.
Well, listen, I'm a theater animal.
Yeah.
I moved to New York on purpose for a reason.
Mm,
There's something about the history of theater, the feeling of theater, the energy of theater. It's my personality to go like 100 miles an hour until I stop and then kind of fall in gratitude after that. So television can tend to be a little slow for me, the
Mm.
waiting, and then the repetition and repetition. But I've been working on The Gilded Age, this new show for HBO, and I'm enjoying myself so much because I'm learning from so many amazing people, but I'm also, um, there is a theatricality about it, which takes me back to the fact that, to answer your question, theater, theater,
Mm.
theater, theater, theater for me.
Yeah.
But, I love doing it. And people say like, they sort of act like you're leaving theater because you're going to do some TV. I've always been confused by that. It's almost like how we also get insured. It's like
Yeah.
we're actors, but we have to choose either Actors Equity or SAG-AFTRA or AGMA if you sing. And what I want to say is a performer, an actor is an actor. So
mhm.
we want to do different things. We want to try different genres. We want to do every single thing we can, I think, because it makes us better. I mean, I think TV is only different in that it's still human. It's still
Mhm.
searching for the truth, whatever that truth is. I like to think of it as one sort of given to the world and more and louder, and one the truth can be given in a whisper. They're really so similar in a way. There's a technicality to television. There's close-ups, there's angles, there's eye lines, there's hit your marks. It's a lot less intuitive. It's more, um, like I said, mechanical. But so there is a job to that. There's a real talent to that. I think to still be emotive and finding the truth while you're trying to hit a mark. That's.
Mm.
But theater to me is you get on a train of sort of adrenaline rush joy and you ride it out, and when it's over, you walk away and you said, I did that. And it's
Yeah.
cathartic and it's an explosion for me. Whereas TV is a long, steady, and little tiny moments of joy and
Mhm.
little tiny adrenaline rushes. And I
Yeah.
think they're very valuable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I kind of like that he brought up whistling. You have the coolest way of whistling. You can like whistle without taking a breath. Same as my brother. You and Jake whistle the same exact way. Can you explain how you whistle? I just think it's so cool.
Well, I love it that you brought that. Jake and I, we used to try to, they wouldn't let us, but we wanted to harmonize the whistles.
Oh.
They were like, no, 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 that's too complicated. But we actually could harmonize, like, and then he would. So anyway, you don't have to take a breath because whistling, the air going through the larynx, either in or out, is the same. So you can go in or out. So you can go, I don't know,
This is so cool.
That's so cool.
thing. And so we would just whistle all the time, even if, and the last thing you're supposed to do backstage is whistle. So
Yeah.
we'd whistle a little bit and then we'd turn circles and spit or whatever. But yeah, I love both of my grandmothers from an early age. I would hear them in the kitchen being like,
Mm.
like birds. You know who can whistle really well, like
Yeah.
beautifully, like an old fashioned movie is Matthew Broderick, like a bird.
Oh.
It,
Really
like he can do like a little, bird.
Like a riff.
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Anyway,
interesting.
whistling is happy.
That would have
Yeah.
been so yeah, whistle a happy tune. That would have been so cool if you and Jake could harmonize whistling. That's just epic.
Well, maybe that's coming. Maybe that's coming,
Maybe
Sydney.
that's coming. You'll do a whole whistling concert. I don't know.
While he's doing like brain surgery, I'll stand behind him and go,
I'm sure that would be very helpful.
patient. Yeah.
Yeah. Um,
Oh my gosh.
so I want to talk about another show that you did with my brother, Peter Pan Live. And I think that the whole experience of putting on a live televised one-time musical is the coolest and also the most terrifying thing. A little bit. Yeah. Um I have a couple questions, but I want to know what was the process like for you of developing that, of being a part of that.
Well, we sort of rehearsed it like you would, theater, or, you're blocking, or even maybe television or a film, you're sort of blocking it out. But we rehearsed in a studio to get all the numbers and the dancing and taped out. So more like theater.
Yeah.
And then when we moved over into this airplane hangar, because it was this full set where we literally, the crew ran to different big, huge sets. That was so strange. That was like we were in an alien world. I thought it was so cool because it was this, what I'm talking about, this new way of doing something. And but then when it was live and you knew, and now we're all used to this. We're used to singing into a camera with no response, but you have this feeling that you're being watched, or you have
Mhm.
Mhm.
you have this recall, right? Especially for all of us who have performed, you sort of have a recall of what it feels like to be performing for someone. So you put that into your blank performance here on a computer screen. That's what it was like. It was like crickets, but at the same time, it was live and you felt this nervous energy. I mean, major things went down for me. I
Yeah.
worked for weeks with that dog and everything was perfect. And I have to hand it to him. I've been changed by that dog forever, Bodie.
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 Aw.
But I mean, we all did. Jake, we all had to have like real sessions with this dog so that he would trust us. And then the night of the actual live thing, during my solo I'm just singing by myself with the dog, the Steadicam broke right in front of me, and they had
No.
to, while I'm singing, and the dog never takes his eyes off of me, never looked at all this in front of me. You're looking at me singing like all calmly, trying to calmly. I'm like probably like this. They're running across, yelling like,
Yeah, right.
this cameraman runs out, another one comes in between time they had these side cameras, so they went to camera two, and they got me from this angle. Then this other guy comes. This is all happening while I'm doing this thing. And when I watched it back, I was making sure that my eyes weren't giving away the fact that the entire world was falling apart in front of me as far as the theater, I mean the camera. But the dog, Bodhi, never stops his action.
Wow.
What
The
an
dog,
incredible
what
dog.
dog doesn't like look up at no, he did his action. I had my treats in my little, so I had to secretly like give him the little treat and everything. He was amazing. He was better than all of us.
Oh, he
Bodhi
was
was
just
the
amazed
rock.
at your singing.
That Bodhi was the one he won. He was the one.
Yeah.
I that was gonna be one of the questions that I was gonna ask. I think it's such an incredible story because it not only shows like how much of a trooper you are to just act natural while, as you said, the world was falling apart around you and everyone was freaking out. But it also shows how incredible the crew of Peter Pan Live was. How just fast and just
They were amazing. I mean, these guys that do these live shows, like the Kennedy Center Honors, the Grammys, the Oscars, the Emmys, whatever, um, they it is a true lifetime skill.
Yeah.
Just it's just amazing to me. They know what they're doing. There has to be a stillness in their heart, sort of like a non stress out kind of policy.
mhm,
It's fine, it's nothing, fine. Go to two. It's
mhm.
almost probably like a pilot or that personality or that skill to say, take a breath. I'm going to push two. I'm going to change it to this, and we're going to be okay.
Yeah.
I love that. I was watching the making of Peter Pan Live a couple days ago to kind of refresh myself, but also it's cool because I also get to see my brother in it. Um, and I specifically noted just how, like you said, just calm and collected and steady these people were, and I was just like, though, that must be such a comforting energy to have these people who, no matter what happens, they're like, it's fine. We'll just just go onto that camera, go onto this angle.
Yeah. And now let's move. Let's walk like 150 yards to the next set and be set up and ready and go. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's
So it was pretty magical that way. I know from the other end of it, it can seem, especially since it's live, it can seem still or stayed, because you don't have that live audience in it. But there's so many beautiful things happening to make that happen. It
yeah,
was, I loved it. It was an extraordinary experience.
yeah.
Is the rehearsal process similar to like any musical like rehearsal process? Yeah.
Yes, yes. I think it's really about, the only thing I think different in general with filming anything, and now we're sort of filming everything, so you get it.
Yeah.
But those marks, being in the right light, being in the right position, and we do that with theater. When we do tech rehearsals, they're like, "Please, you're 1 inch off. Aren't you supposed to be on 6?" It's a similar idea to that, in that you get everything, all the dances, all the entrances and exits, and everything is right. But those marks are so important because then that camera zooms in, and if you're standing over here, then you've just messed up the shot. So that's the bigger difference. But yeah, we were in those Baryshnikov or studios there on 37th Street, with those huge rooms, and just doing it like it was a musical, with tape and yeah,
Yeah.
Right.
having
Wow.
the dog rehearsals.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Was Bill Berloni like the dog trainer? Yeah, he's
He's
the best. He
incredible.
literally does everything. I don't understand.
He does everything. And we got a new puppy a couple of years ago, and then I had to go to Tokyo to do The King and I, and he took the puppy. He and his family took the puppy, Dorothy and Bill, and raised him for a month while we were gone. And
Stop.
my dog Bradley got to live with Bodhi. It
Oh.
all came together. Yeah.
Did Bradley did he learn any new tricks while he was there?
Actually, it was so funny, and it's very true. Bill's like the best trainer in the world, and we got this letter, and Bill was like, basically your dog is untrainable, and
Stop it.
he'll be a better senior dog. And in the meantime, if you want to give these to him for anxiety,
Oh my gosh.
and actually, it's
That's
very
so
true. He's this dog. We love him so much, but he's like, squirrel. He's
Oh,
out to hunt. Yeah,
that's so
what
adorable.
kind
I
of
love
what
those
kind
kind of
of dog
dogs.
is it?
he's a little cockapoo, mostly
Oh my
poodle though,
gosh.
and he's so sweet. But he's like, he just if I walk into the room, he goes, and then he sees,
Oh,
you know,
Yeah.
he's. I would say he's high anxiety.
mm. The
Which
Bill Berlone, you can train him.
I know.
That's
he's
so sweet.
untrainable. Yes, yes.
We mentioned before you've actually co-starred with like a dear friend of mine, Matthew Morrison, in several different like projects that you've worked on. So, can you talk about like what it's like to work with people like that in a project and like how you can feed off of other people when doing a project, and also like is that something you consider when taking on a project?
Absolutely. I think you learn quickly enough that making art with people that you love to make art with and that you feel
Hmm.
safe with is one of the most important parts of your process. It's really sort of for me, there's a collaboration to theater that I love so much, and I'm in theater for that collaboration. And so without it, for me, it's like I'm not interested, you
Mm,
know. Um, and there's also I'll use the word again, safety. Safety
Right.
meaning, it's like in school or if you did a acting training program, whatever, it was that safe place to fall and be caught, or to pass the ball and it be passed back, or to open and and break down all the walls, and you can trust others to receive openly. I think that's why theater animals are so inclusive. In general, we all have more work to do, but we try to be. We come here to be included and to be safe. Um, and so when you have a partner on stage, you depend on them for so much more than you think. And when you don't, you're only sabotaging your own show.
Right.
When you decide it's a solo position, it's a solo ride, and I'm not going to really listen or need or accept from others, then your performance will really, really suffer for that. It's
mm,
when you go deeply into each other that you make something really great. And one of my first real leading man on Broadway was Matthew, and to learn that sort of trust, and he continues to be now one of my dearest closest friends, sort of like a brother, because we
Hmm.
did that together. We sort of built that together, which was I was playing a role that was confusing to me, and he basically was catching me every day as I
Wow.
fell. And I'll never forget that. It's something is ingrained in me about him, maybe because of that. And the most interesting thing to me, because these moments you don't forget, when I did win the Tony in 2015, I was sort of like, as you saw, I was sort of like my mind was blown, and I walked off the stage, and he was just happened to be standing there because he was presenting in the next,
Oh
or
my
like he had
gosh.
just presented or something. And there's a picture online that I'm going to frame it. It's like one of my favorite pictures in the world. He has lifted me up, and I'm bawling, and my head is in his shoulder, and he's got me. He had the big beard, uh,
Yeah.
yeah, and
The J.M. Barry beard.
yes, he's holding me up in the air, and he's holding me. And I remember thinking this isn't an accident. Like for him to be the first person that I saw right after that, which was pretty cool.
Wow. That's
wow.
so beautiful.
Because I knew he was legitimately, this is a competitive world, and you can start to move out of people's way when you realize that it's all apples and oranges, and we have our own path. And just because someone succeeds doesn't mean that you'll fail. It's actually
Yes.
quite the opposite. There's like room for all of us, but you don't know
Heck
that when you're young as much, because you feel like you're trying to earn your spot,
yeah.
and you think you're
Uh-huh.
competing for one spot. Whereas you get a little bit older, and if you do start to have a modicum of success, you sort of find that spot, and then you can have more generosity in your heart. It's human nature to want and to compare, but I think that I knew that I could fall into his arms as a friend because I knew that he was legitimately happy for me,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that was so important for me at in that moment.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Speaking of you know being young and not you know, doubting yourself and not fully learning yet, you know, you're still on the process of learning that there is space for all of us in this world. um well, you're a legend through and through, and I want to know, is there any advice that you have for people like me and Eli, and maybe there's a child in Oklahoma who watches you on the Tony Awards every year, who dreams of being up on that stage one day. Is there anything that you would tell them? Is there any advice you would give them?
Um, my advice has changed over the years, but I'm going to give advice that has to do with this moment that we're in, because it's sort of a play on the fact that we never really have control, do we? We never really know what's going to happen, because here we are, guys. And
Yeah.
I want to I want to really applaud you guys for sort of taking the bull by the horn and making art and creativity during this moment, because a lot of people have just given up. And I have no judgment on that, because it's a very, very hard time, and you've only known one thing and it's disappeared. But the advice I'm going to give, and I hope there's someone in Oklahoma watching. I certainly was inspired by so many people growing up, and it really does give us sort of a path to try to, to try to follow, but also while building our own path. But the advice is that while you're doing this, while you're climbing this ladder or making this art or whatever you consider life, towards success, some modicum of success. Hopefully it's not like that and then that, more like this, right?
Mm-hmm.
While you're doing that, make your other life too.
Mm.
It's my biggest advice. And that doesn't have to mean marriage and children. That's not for everybody. But it does mean relationships. It means friendships that are stayed and true and rock solid. Those friends that you know are legitimately happy for you. The ones that make space for you, the ones that stay in their lane and celebrate your lane. Build your world around you, because when this art, when this creativity gets stilted, and it does once in a while, even if you've succeeded a lot, you're still going to have to do this for a minute, because then you won't know what this feels like again. That's the way life works.
Mm-hmm.
There is
Mm-hmm.
no this, there is no this. It's sort of like
So
this,
like a
right?
wave.
It's like a wave. If you're lucky,
Yeah.
it's a wave, right?
Right.
Or it's like a little like this. It's like that,
Yeah.
but if you do that, so what's happened is, in moments like the pandemic, when it's all taken from you, what else is there for you? What else is there? There's love, there's relationships. And in those relationships that you trust, then you get together and do a podcast and you make it.
Yeah.
So, so that's my advice. My advice is to have other, right? Because the other then so feeds your art. It
Mm-hmm.
so feeds your creativity. And so the work cannot be the only thing. The celebrity and the work cannot be the only thing you have. So that's my advice for today, because I feel like I've been more grateful about the fact that in this moment I have my family.
Yeah.
I have my
Right.
family. Like, I'm almost celebrating some days that we're just here together, because I spent so many years wishing I had more time for them.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's my advice, because you'll be a better artist and probably a more successful artist when that happens.
I
Wow.
love that. Yeah, definitely one of the things that I've loved most about quarantine, especially since Jake and I have been like since before I can remember, I've been like working at the same time, and we've missed quite a few years together doing this. One of my favorite things is definitely spending this time and bonding with him. Also, my parents and my brother Brock and my cats.
Yeah.
um, but you've given the most wonderful advice. Thank you so much, Kelli. We're just beyond honored to have you on.
Yeah, seriously. I mean, just the fact that like like as like a performer, you often it's like easy to lose track of your loved ones and like the people that actually like care about you and your family, and you get out of touch with them. But it literally wasn't until like Corona and like the whole quarantine where like being taking a step back and like allowing myself to be vulnerable with these people and like get back in touch with like my friends and all of that, like it wasn't until then that like I had new inspiration as an actor and as an artist. And like when you allow yourself to like let loose, because you're staying in this one space, like it tends to get at like a standstill. And then like when you allow yourself to open back up, you have like all of these new ideas and these new perspectives and all of these things as an artist. So like when you said that, it was just like, yeah, that is true. Like I should, I'll make sure to allow myself to do that when we're not in quarantine.
Yeah, it's great. And you guys are the kind of people to do that. I mean, you're rich artists who have already experienced a lot. So you can compare and contrast,
Hmm.
And so you know the difference between sort of losing ourselves in the headiness of it all. And I've been there a million times. But think about what you're doing when you're acting. You're going deep inside uh, a person, and you can only do that if you know people. And so you're not going to be able to play the elusive like Instagram character that although that's so fun, but you will play your grandmother or your grandfather over and over again in your life, or your mom or your dad, or you'll play that relationship, or your brother. You're going to play the relationships. You're going to play those loves, those losses, those characteristics of the person that you know deeply, more so than strangers. So it only behooves you and makes you a better artist to go deep inside people and relationships. That's just
Hmm.
my opinion of what we're creating. Writers need to know characters. They need to know people to write them. Actors need to know people to play them. So it's just an important thing to do as we go into this world of sort of disjointedness with human beings. Like, we don't really know each other as well as we should. So I'm saying the ones you can trust, the ones you know deeply, know them more and more and more. And I'm talking faults, great, good things, bad things. Know them, because you'll use it all the time.
Wow.
I've had so many revelations during this
Yeah,
episode.
seriously.
You're you're just incredible, and you give the best advice. Um, I my brother's been really lucky to work with you.
Yeah.
I keep thinking that I was like I just keep thinking about like all the times like Jake you got to like just listen to you and listen to your advice and
Listen,
wow.
I heard way more about his Dreams of YouTube channel than he ever heard from me.
Oh my gosh.
He was going to do like a gaming channel,
It
and he was
was.
going to make a YouTube channel.
Yeah, for the longest time, he had an intro and yeah, an
Yeah,
entire thing. He was like, "I'm gonna do this and this." He didn't end up making the YouTube channel, but he's gonna be a doctor now, so I guess.
yeah, exactly. But you know what? You guys taught me a lot. And I know that, I don't know, gosh, we've been talking, but I don't know if I'm taking you over, but I'm enjoying our talk. Thank you. But you guys taught me a lot. And now you, Eli, in that I used to sort of think that, and maybe because I started later and I did so much, other kind of stuff. And I thought, well, that's good, because by the time I got to be an adult, I wasn't quite burnt out of it or whatever. And then I sort of made this decision when I met you guys and your sort of lovely family and your supportive parents and stuff, that sometimes it's just people's time. It's really sometimes just a certain person's time. And that can be 2 years old, 10 years old, 75 years old. And, this is an interesting story, and I've never talked about it out loud, and I don't think they would mind. But my brother and sister's best friends are a family named the Farmers, Misty and Clark Farmer. And they had a
Oh my
little baby. I
gosh.
remember when she was born, and she always was just this little bright spirit, and she used to call me. She wanted to be in musical theater, she wanted to do musical theater, she wanted to do musical theater. And then she taught herself ventriloquism. And several years back, they called me and they said, Darcy's just gotten the golden buzzer on America's Got Talent,
Oh my
and what
gosh.
do we do? And I'm sitting there, and my every
No
instinct was to
way.
say, hold up, guys, this is going to change everything. It's she needs to live, she needs to live her life a little bit. And I thought of the Lucas kids. I was sitting in my car, and I said, go for it, go now, sign the papers, sign the Simon Cowell papers, get an attorney, go for it. It's her time. She's too good. She was too good at that. I mean, she still is, but I said, there's nothing like her. If she waits, if she misses that opportunity. It
Mm.
changed my thought. It changed my thought on all of it. But I was using you two kids in my head, saying, that's, you can't stop someone from where they are just because you think you do better. So anyway, that's
Mhm.
Darcy Farmer.
I know exactly who you're talking about.
And yeah, so the ventriloquist. Uh,
Yeah.
but anyway, so you've taught me too. So take all that you've learned that you've already experienced,
Mhm.
both of you, Eli and Sydney, more than
Oh
so many people
my
ever would at the
gosh.
age that you've been,
Yeah, so do
and
I.
compare and contrast that to what's really valuable
Yeah.
in life so that you can have those moments again, but also have this richness of life that you're taking on in between. It's such an opportunity that's very, very full of just a wealth of knowledge. So use it.
Yeah. And definitely everyone has their own journeys, their own timelines. I couldn't even imagine um I think my career and when I got on Broadway and got to experience, the whole Tony Awards, I think that happened at the exact right time for me, and I think everything that's happened in my life thus far has been truly perfect, and I think hindsight is 2020. I
Hmm.
guess ironically enough, um,
Mhm.
but but yeah, I especially now I'm looking back and I'm just viewing how things played out ever since I was 6 and I got a manager, but like I was begging for a manager since I was 4, um, and yeah, like you said, everyone has their timeline, has their time.
Absolutely, absolutely. And
Yeah.
we have to be realistic about that. And then, as we say, life will then give us this if we're lucky, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You just don't want to do that.
Nice steady wave.
You're
No, we do
right.
not want a downward
You
slope.
want to go. You want to go up and down, up and down. It's like a river. It's like a little bit of a because you have to know the highs to know the lows, and vice versa, right?
Yeah.
Right.
So, it's
Perfect.
so take tomorrow if it's a bad day, take it and say, oh, it's only because there's going to be a great one, and I can compare and contrast.
Yes.
Right.
Like, oh, this is just the bottom of the wave. Let's go
Exactly. But
we'll
that
go
means
back up.
I'm going back up. That means I'm
Yeah,
going
Yeah.
back up. Yeah.
exactly.
Well, thank you so much. We can't thank you enough for your time and your willingness to chat with us. We've had a blast and I learned so much and Sydney said it as well. So thank you.
I've
You're
learned
welcome.
so much.
Yeah.
Like I'm gonna be thinking about this for a while because
Mhm.
you've just said
Oh,
a
that's what
lot of.
happens when you get older and you're like a wise old sage.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Thank you, Kelly.